questions based on that, but the reality is it's there. So when it comes to knowing, and that's why I kind of led that nice picture before this, is intuition. It's knowing something from the gut, and beauty is one of those things that seems to come from the gut. Some of the pitfalls with using intuition as a method of knowing, and again, this is the short list. Confirmation bias. When it comes to intuition, very often we ignore the misses, but we remember hits. In other words, I've used my intuition a number of times, and gee, I got it right. I knew how to find this place. I knew how to get this done. I used intuition to figure out how to move this very fragile podium across the front of the room. And the reality is that very often we become confident when we use intuition, but that's because we remember the hits. We forget how many times we got it wrong. And I think it's important to count those times. Personal bias is introduced with intuition. We make stuff up. As human beings, ask any psychology professor and they'll show you the studies behind it. Humans make stuff up all the time. We have untested ideas, and of course, it's a bad habit. Yes?
When you say make stuff up, are you saying consciously lying, or we're filling in the gaps?
Yeah, let's dissect that one just in half. A conscious lie would mean, I know that's wrong, I'm going to tell it. Very often we tell lies.
Yeah.
We tell lies, and then it's not until a minute later where I go, oh, that was not correct. And I could have known better had if I'd had that module in my brain turned on, if I want to keep it simple.
You had basically pitfalls. I think there is some very good things with intuition.
Yes.
Years ago, when I first started learning the arguments for atheism and for religion and that line of thinking, one of the very first videos I saw on YouTube was a guy by the name of Dr. William Lane Craig. You've probably heard of him.
Yep.
Bills himself as a philosopher, but I didn't understand the argument at first, but my intuition was, there's something really wrong with this argument, which made me start looking more at, my intuition was, I don't think there's a pile of pitfalls. I think there is something very positive about intuition.
Sure.
That, works
unchecked,
in our favor.
there are pitfalls, and I think you're right. Intuition is what got us, to human species to survive for as long as it did. That was the best way we made decisions in the days when we were tracking animals and trying to hunt. Yes.
So maybe we can make a distinction between using intuition as a guide and declaring a knowledge.
Well, yes, I think you can, but I think, and I'll talk more about that, it is a way of knowing something, though, like faith is. Faith is a way to know something, and I like your distinction. I think the important part here is that, generally speaking, it can be a very bad habit, and we need to put it in its place, is all I'm saying. Put it in its place, recognize that we can be very intuitive and good at using it, but also recognize that it has these pitfalls. Yes?
I think of intuition sort of in the same way that I would think of an anecdote. It's not evidence, it's not a good way necessarily to know something, but it might be a good reason to start investigating further. Like I assume you eventually went and figured out what exactly was wrong, and you didn't just say, that's wrong because of my intuition.
Oh yeah, I did. I mean, when I first saw that video, I didn't know what a logical fallacy was.
Right.
It was not my area. I'm a trailer mechanic. This is not my, And, but I learned a lot, and it's just, there's something in the beginning of almost any arguments, whether it be, even the global warming argument. I was actually a very, very staunch supporter of people who thought global warming. And then I started looking at the other arguments. My intuitions were, hey, they have something here. Then I started learning about it, and then I thought, no, they started getting off track, and I went back to what I believe now. I don't. It's just I think intuition guides us, and if like you said, used properly.
Yeah. And that's really all I'm going to say about any of these is let's put them in the place that they belong in. They are ways of knowing, though. And anyway, I'll move on if you don't mind, because I think our last speaker went a good 10 minutes into my talk, and I just want to hit the high points here, guys. Tenacious beliefs exist in society, and these are those long-standing beliefs that have been there for forever. The idea that there is a God, and I mean no malice to anybody who thinks there is, It's just the idea that there is a God isn't a good example of those tenacious beliefs. The idea that there needs to be a creator. These stories that have been accepted as true with no means of verification. Sometimes they fall definitely into the categories of superstition or gossip. Some pitfalls and solutions to tenacious beliefs. First of all, a tenacious belief can be true, just like intuition can be. You can be right in intuition, and some of those old beliefs can be correct. But personal bias gets introduced to it. St. Paul wrote a lot about homosexuality and declared it a sin and so on. And that belief in the realm of Christendom has gone on for a couple thousand years now, virtually unchecked. People still might, like people I love in my family, go back to the scripture and say, but St. Paul said, and there's no critical analysis of that of those beliefs. Acceptance of some blatant untruths is another pitfall. There's no way to verify some of the information in these old tenacious beliefs. Sometimes they can be verified. My mother used to tell me all the time that if you swallow your bubble gum, that it will stay in your stomach forever. I don't know why she said that when I was a kid. She wanted me to spit it out, but I eventually found out that no, you digest it and pass it just like any other food. It can lead to erroneous and sometimes dangerous beliefs, and I'm not going to tell the bleeding story. I'm going to defer back to what Arthur Schaeffer said, just to make my point, is that in Clifford, the idea that some of these old beliefs, unchecked, can lead us to make some really bad decisions, like attacking Jews and blaming them for the death of Christ. And societies, what the Nazis came up with and some of their ideas. Some of those were very old, untested ideas that Hitler latched onto, and away they went. It can leave you open to manipulation if you use some of these old tenacious beliefs without checking them. And the solution, of course, is to avoid the use of this method of knowing something, except for some of the smaller decisions in life. And I think, as with any of them, that applies. Authority. This is where we accept something from somebody just because they are an authority figure. It relies on information or answers from an expert in a particular field of study. And I'm not going to dissect this one very much, because I think it's rather obvious to us that personal bias from the authority figure can easily find its way into the information that they give to us. It leaves us open to manipulation. Sometimes we can't tell if the person knows what they're talking about. Like that engineer and author who's giving that long talk about evolution. There are many people who were swayed by that video. And I found a copy of that video and some of Kent Hovind's video in one of my family members' house. So I was going through, we were sharing videos and telling stories, and I was like, oh, look at this. And I was told how great this is. It's like, wow. I'll leave it at that. And the solution to this, at least in part, is to seek answers from a public forum where experts are encouraged to debate their ideas. Now, published studies in journals and things like this, they can still be wrong. But the idea is you're getting some of the better information in there, I think on average, compared to what you would find in other places. And I really do like the idea of going to a university, a professional association, or a college and finding out what they think about certain things. Solution: you can also become your own expert by studying something in a field of study and applying some of the skeptical, critical analysis techniques as you move through your studies. And of course, that leads us authority. It leads us to faith. And this is a variation of the methods of authority and tenacity that require unquestioning trust in an authority, text, or a concept. And I had a long chat with that this morning, just before I got here, about faith with one of my family members. And you mentioned cargo cults. Personal bias can be brought into just about anything we do. Even good science is subject to the experimenter bias. And cargo cults exist out there, and one of the faith stories I had about that was simply this, is that in the 1600s, in the Micronesia, Polynesia areas, Spanish ships showed up at some of the old islands, and basically the people on those islands had a religious belief, and I'm giving you a very paraphrased version of this. They had their set of religious beliefs, and these outsiders came in with that, by appearance, were rich they had all kinds of things with them, this cargo that they carried with them, and that set, as these ships showed up, the stories went from island to island, and they weren't quite yet cargo cults at this point in time, but there was a belief that these outsiders were almost gods, when they showed up in these places, because their technology was so far beyond that of the local islanders, what they had. And years later, when the United States Army was using some of those islands for military bases, the cargo cults that we see today flourished and came into full bloom. And what happened really was they saw these people who, a man sat at a desk with a box on the desk that made radio noises, which he just saw as a voice speaking out of a box at that time, and the man would pick up a microphone or a thing and talk into it, and cargo would drop from the sky as he asked for this. Things flying in the sky would land. All of these technologies seemed almost godlike for those people on this island, or these islands. And cargo cults formed, and essentially what they did is they tried to imitate the actions of these people that had come to those islands. And if you'd like to learn more about cargo cults, go to the Smithsonian Institute website, type in cargo cult, and take a look at what they have. National Geographic has published stories on this with wonderful pictures of people with they built runways with fake aircraft built out of bamboo. They march up and down. They have a radio tower there that has no radio in it. And they literally put on coconut headphones and stand there. And as a part of their religious belief, they have somebody on watch for this man. Now I'm going to botch his name. Yeah, I keep wanting to say it's Bob Frum, the guy that used to be a radio announcer, but his first name, whatever it was, is, say it was Ken Frum, or whatever it was. And
He's John.
Thank you, I think it is John. But the idea is simply this, is that somebody at some point in time had asked this man, who are you? And he says, I'm John from, and that became his name, John from Atlanta, perhaps. And this John from became the figurehead of the cargo cult. And faith, this story has been passed on for a while, and cargo cults exist today. These same people now, starting after the 1940s, have still maintained this religious belief where they wait for John Frum to come back, and when John Frum comes back, he's going to bring cargo with him and make them all rich and set them all free again. It has a very Christian twist to it, this whole story, that this God is going to return. And this wonderful, pardon me for blocking on the details of the name again, I don't know why I'm doing this, but basically David Attenborough was there, and he was interviewing one of the proponents of this religion, and asked him questions, and he asked him, you've been waiting for 45 years now. How do you, are you getting discouraged about John Frum coming back to bring his cargo to your island? And the fella turned to David Attenborough and basically said this, says, you're from a Christian society and you've been waiting for Jesus Christ for 2,000 years. You tell me. And I'm paraphrasing it, but you get the idea is that these are all things that happen as a result of faith. What really moved me about the cargo cult story was how quickly a religion was formed and became placed into the society in an almost permanent structure. That was very interesting to me, to see that something like that could happen, and in 45 years they've actually got a formal religion has come out of this. Faith encourages adherents not to think critically about an idea. The idea that we accept something on faith, it turns off the process of skeptical inquiry, not always a healthy place to be. And the solution, of course, is to avoid the use of faith, except for small decisions. I have faith that my wife loves me, and I do believe that is faith in that sense. She tells me she loves me, but I don't know what she's thinking. I don't know what's going on inside of her head. She treats me kindly. She kisses me on the forehead when I fall asleep, and a number of other things happen that lead me to tend to believe that indeed she does love me. But ultimately, I have to admit to myself that I'm taking a leap of faith to know that she loves me. And I'm okay with that. So the reality is, I don't think everybody can escape from faith. I don't think it's always a bad thing. It's just, as a way of knowing something, it needs to be put in its place, just like every one of the other methods of knowing that we have.